Hello and welcome to the Art Department podcast. It's episode 54. And today, next to Emmanuel Shiu here no, Emmanuel is not in Singapore. I'm in Singapore. Emmanuel is in San Francisco, also starts with an S. So at least I have that. But we have two more guests you can see here up above in the video feed. The person to the left is Neal Spackman. He's the CEO and founder of Regenerative Resources, and he's also how he'd like to call himself a terraformer. We'll get to that in a second. And then on the right here, you have Saiful Haque. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He's a concept designer, artist, director, and he most recently worked heavily on the Avatar sequels alongside James Cameron. And of course, many, many more things. So in this discussion, we're going to talk, of course, a little bit about why Neal is here, why Saiful is here. But we're also going to talk about something very interesting that I think touched us all maybe in the last year or so, or during COVID, I think even more so. And that's, however you want to call it, the artist's dilemma, the artist's struggle to find meaning in their work, to find meaning for themselves, for others, and not only do the work we're tasked to do, not only the client work that we as commercial artists are very used to doing, but again, finding meaning beyond that. And I don't know if there's a good segue into that. Maybe we'll start with, like we always do, with some personal stories. And I think Emmanuel has something to contribute to that, and maybe Saiful as well. But I want to maybe throw it to our first guest, to Saiful, maybe to kind of start things off a little bit, because he's kind of the catalyst between, I think, this collaboration that we're going to talk about. So.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Jan. I don't know how to follow up that sort of such
an epic
introduction.
That's the only thing we need here. But go ahead.
Yeah, the dilemma we all had during, I guess, the global pandemic, right? We're all stuck at home. Not only fortunate enough to have a job and work through the pandemic, but also look at our own families, at our own lives, look out the window and ponder what the hell is the meaning of it all. I think, well, I can't get into details about it, but Jan and I worked on a project together for quite some time, where I kind of looked for that meaning. It was one of the hardest projects we, I think, did together, and didn't really find it. Left that gig and found myself talking to a terraformer as to how to interject some form of meaning into what comes out of our fingertips, for lack of a better word. And I'm still searching. Can't say that I found it, but I could say that I definitely feel like I'm working towards it.
Wow, that's we're going very deep here very quickly, I think. I mean, but like I think we mentioned the pandemic a few times, but I think maybe the pandemic though was not really the cause of this like thinking, but it was more again like an accelerator to a certain degree. I mean, I'm sure you've been thinking about this kind of stuff long before, but I don't know, do you feel like, I mean, we talked about that project just now, and that's actually also where Neal came into the picture. But I don't know, was there like a time before that where you felt like, I don't know, this can't be all like that I'm doing? Like the projects, the client projects and everything I'm doing can't be everything. I don't know.
Well,
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't even know how the hell I even got here. That being my career, right? It's not like I plan to work for somebody like James Cameron. It's not like I plan to work in the film industry. None of this. I call all of this serendipity, right? It just happened to occur, and I'm very grateful it did. I didn't really start out wanting to be a concept artist. I think in the beginning, when I was really young, it was really about expressing emotions, expressing feelings that I had deep inside. It happened to be on a canvas, it happened to be on Photoshop, it happened to be a movie that I was trying to make. But the intention was never to enter an industry or to become a concept artist or to design a film like Avatar, right? That was never the fulcrum of those decisions. Before before becoming an adult, before having to earn a living, I think I just enjoyed exploring myself through the
Mm-hmm.
medium, right? It was almost like looking into a mirror, looking at myself, judging myself, really, based on the artwork that I would create. And I think when we made that switch over to the commercial side, where we started to make a living doing the very thing that we used to do for ourselves, it began to erode at maybe the sole purpose. I don't know what to call it. And I don't mean erode in a negative way either. I think it I think it incentivized doing good concept art, doing great work for films, but it didn't incentivize digging deeper into my own identity.
Yeah, no. What are you working on these days? I mean, I know Avatar. You're done with that? So are you doing projects like in search of this that what you're looking for, or are you back to like big commercial projects? And what are you up to these days?
I used to search for it in work. I used to search for it in professional work, right? Like I'll get excited if I found a project that was aligned with maybe something I was interested in, maybe aligned with maybe a philosophical book that I had been reading at the time. But it's so rare to find projects like Avatar, guys. Like, I mean, I know you guys know this, right? It's just working on a movie isn't necessarily enough for me as an artist. It used to be what I thought would be enough until I got there, and then the clouds just a great opportunity, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do at the time. I think nowadays what I do is don't necessarily search anymore. I don't hope for a job that's going to give me some form of passion. I have distinctly drawn a line between work that feeds my mouth and work that feeds my soul, for lack of a better word. And so nowadays I find myself in different industries. You know, I've been doing architecture for quite some time, had no idea that that was a thing. It's a thing now. Uh, I found myself working for aerospace. Didn't know that was a thing. It's a thing now. Again, none of this was planned. It's all serendipity. I chuck it up to what some of us call the universe. Some people call it God. Some people call um, it luck. Uh, I have the side that feeds my mouth, and that's any job that can pay the bills. And when I have that okay, when I have that going about, then I can focus on the shit that actually matters, the stuff that I'm really interested in. So I'm always working pretty much daily on a personal project, probably because I just want to be able to be happy day by day, right? It keeps me alive, for lack of a better word. It keeps me feeling rejuvenated.
What's the shit that matters to you?
I feel
Like
like this.
I'm not gonna let you go on this because I mean, for me, there's a lot of, I'm sure for Jan, for Neil, for me, we all have different thing that matters. But since you're on the subject, and I love to see what you have to say, Neil, about it. What matters to you, Saiful?
I feel like this turned into a therapy
That's
session.
good.
It always does, man. Have you not watched our podcast episodes?
I have, and I've also gone to therapy. So I I pondered this question of what matters, and I think it's a very personal and a very selfish question, and not in a bad way. For me personally, I look out my window and I see a world that the dichotomy is quite heartbreaking. One of my first jobs I ever got right out of college was at a studio called Section Studios in downtown LA. And I remember looking out of my office window and I would see just this gigantic homeless population. And then I'd look at my monitor and I was painting an incredible sci-fi cityscape. And my brain could not ignore one over the other. And I was here building a fantasy sort of video game at the time, but every time I'd go out during lunch, I would see quite the opposite of that fantasy. And so I think what matters to me today is doing art that begins to peel away at those layers of those things that internally really bother me about society, bother me about myself, right? And I really mean bother me. Like they really bug me. And it's not that the art is the solution, but the art tends to become a dialogue that I have with myself when it's personal work. And so what matters to me is that I'm always pursuing that internal dialogue with that personal work. Otherwise, the art tends to feel like a waste of my time.
So like something like what's behind you, like it could be any form, right? In canvas, it just depends on how you feel, and that at that moment is what you do, right? I mean, some of it digital, some of it analog. There's no real rules, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I used to think there were, right? I think what happened in the beginning is when I got into concept art, I started to learn Photoshop a lot. I also come from a background of filmmaking, and so I would pick up cameras, learn lenses,
Mm.
and at first it was tinkering with the tools, and it was really about, what's the capability of the tool and how does it empower me? And it was a very ego-driven thing of like, well, now I'm a photographer, I'm a director, I'm a concept artist, and it was very much about projecting what I could do with those tools. But once you got used to those tools, it didn't fucking matter. They're just outlets. They're different opportunities to have these conversations. Um, what really got interesting is when other people began to feel what it was I was feeling when I was doing that art. So if it was a painting and a friend or a family member was looking at that painting and without any rehearsal dialogue before about that piece, when they start to regurgitate words that I would use to describe the very thing I was doing, and they were just looking at brushstrokes and color, that was fucking magical.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah,
So there's
that
something
that really
there.
is. Yeah.
There's something there. I don't know what to call it. I don't have words for it, and that's probably why I mess with so many different tools because there's no words for it for me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Neo, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we're
What
coming
matters
from.
to you?
Um, I was going to ask a follow-up question before we get to me, and that was,
Sure.
what, given for you that are artists, given that you had a passion for it, and then it became how you fed your bills, did that dilute the passion? Like, why was it meaningless? Is it because it's someone else's vision that you're portraying? Is it because is it that dichotomy of? I'm interested in exploring that more.
Who wants to take that?
I think you should take it, Jan. You've been listening
Yeah.
the whole
I mean,
time.
it's a fascinating thing, and it's interesting how we all come at it from different angles and arrive maybe at different destinations, but we kind of all meet here at this time to talk about this. I mean, it's interesting. Like Saiful mentioned that, like, he used to do art as just a personal way of expression, um, which I actually never did. So for me, it's like a bit different. I chose. I mean, I did. I can't say I did art as a teenager or as a young kid. I like to draw, but it was just not more than that. I didn't dive any deeper into it. And then by the time I was supposed to determine my future and go to university, I chose the academic path. Not to say there's no creativity there, but it's just a very different way. And then I kind of put the art side aside, I worked as a web designer making websites on the side, but for me that was always very clearly about I don't know, doing a job. And then I had that passion for movies, whatever you want to call that, and then that kind of brought me to concept art. But I learned concept art with the very clear focus on working, on doing somebody else's work.
Career.
Yeah. And so I didn't come from that like, okay, I like this is like turning my hobby into my job kind of thing. It was more like I'm learning this for the job, and then I'm doing that job, and that's it. And of course, I didn't anticipate that we would all be here 10, 15 years ago. But I think we do feel all very similar because, I mean, we're doing creative work, and no matter how much of a distinction you want to put between, I don't know what you want to call it, design and art, like some people do, or like personal and client work, however you want to say that. But you put something of yourself in there, whatever the creative endeavor is, whether you transform the planet like you do, whether you paint, whether you draw, make music, or dance, or I don't know, whatever it is, right? You put something of yourself in there. And at some point, if you really, I think it's for everybody the same, at some point, doing executing somebody else's vision, and just kind of ignoring that part of like, oh, I would have done it differently. Like I think I mean, it's not about right or wrong, but it's like, oh, I would have used red instead of blue. I would have made this bigger or smaller, right? At some point, you resign yourself to just give up all creative control, and you're just like being micromanaged, and you're like, okay, like I'm just gonna like switch my brain off for the lack of a better word, and you just execute whatever somebody else wants to have you do, and then of course, like we kind of or at least I hold myself to like the last kind of stick of like that makes me join any project is like if I get to work with good people. And then I think the last time we teamed, like when Saiful brought me onto that project, it was like, hey, I mean, I really love working with Saiful, so that's why I'm gonna do it, not like necessarily because like, oh my gosh, this is the fulfillment of my dreams. But even that, working, that thing of like working with somebody, at some point that also doesn't hold true anymore. And that has nothing to do with Saiful or anybody else, right? It's just you have to have that connection, at least to some degree, with the art, with the creative, I don't know, the creativity in the air or whatever. You need to find a more direct connection between that, what you want to say, what you want to do. Otherwise, you enter some very, very dark spaces. And I mean, I think that maybe for some people that like where the balance is between like, okay, I need to do this to feed my family, and I need to do this just for my own like sanity. I think where that balance lies is everybody's own kind of like they have to figure that out for themselves. Some people like to do the bare minimum for the client, like the absolute bare, like they say like, oh, I'm gonna work, I don't know, 1 day a month for client work, and I can pay all my bills, and then the rest of the time I'm just gonna do whatever. For other people, it's the opposite, and sometimes it's based on economic necessity, and sometimes it's just personal choice, because they like to have a lavish lifestyle, right? And they have 5 cars and God knows what, right? So and that's fine. Everybody can do it their own way, but I think to acknowledge that the need for that connection between the art you do and who you are and what you want to say is there regardless. I think that's, I mean, I haven't really met any artist, anybody who doesn't feel that way, especially once you got all the the youthful kind of energy sucked out of you by the industry that we work in. You arrive at that. So like, I don't know, past like 35 or 40 or whatever, that's pretty much all that artists talk about, I feel, or at least all the ones I've talked to. I don't know, sorry, that was a bit long-winded, but I don't know, I don't know what Emmanuel and Saiful have to say to that.
Well,
I know what you're going to say, but like the audience needs to hear it. So
yeah, no, I mean, personally, you know, I think I'm I'm about making personal art. I've basically completely switched to doing that because I think I've had enough of not just working with, you know, on projects that are, you know, people's visions, because, you know, obviously that sometimes if you are a person that has vision or has something to say or something to tell, it gets old when you keep telling someone else's story, and a lot of time it's just very limiting, I think, personally. And, you know, working with those good people, that's also difficult to find. And I think for me, I mean, for this last year, the 2021, I basically made it a point to basically stop working and find what I wanted to say in whatever medium, whatever it is, but mainly being able to say something that's personal to me, um, and hopefully something that touches other people as well. But first, it has to be something that, you know, I can do without pulling any punches. Like I can say what I want to say, irregardless of whether the public likes it or not. And when you know, when I did that short, I was like, okay, I think I did that. But in the process, I also worked with people to get it made, and I really loved working with people I enjoyed working with, and that was so important. It was such a contrast to all the film jobs. Like, you know, like in a year, I easily could work on like four, 6 films, and, you know, out of those 4 or 6 films, most of the time it's just literally you just have to do what was told to you, and sometimes they're not really fun people. Sometimes they're okay, and it's very rare that you find a project. I mean, in my 20-year career, I can tell you of 2 projects that were really good out of that 20 years. So I'm just making a go at it, basically, for myself to do what I can to get the stuff that I have inside of my head uh, out, you know, and hopefully somebody likes to see it, and if not, you know, at least I was able to express it. So for me, it's very important at this stage of my life. But I think it depends on what stage of your life you are at and what kind of person you are. How about you, Saiful?
I think Avatar ruined it all for me. Like,
Wow.
not every director is James Cameron.
oh, you mean the experience was too good?
You mean the bar has been set so high that it's never gonna get met again? Is that what you're saying?
I don't want to put the whole Avatar production on a pedestal, but man, was that fucking production amazing. I had full access to the script. I could read any line of the script, which meant that we could have a conversation about the emotions that had to be evoked in the scene, meaning we were really talking about story. And that romantic shit, I can swim in that all fucking day. But most of the film jobs, they're just stupid and derivative. They're like, oh, give me another sci-fi ship. Give me another, you know, greebled fucking background because this has got a trend in an international market. And it's so shallow. Shit is so shallow today.
Oh yeah.
Everything is so goddamn derivative. And I think it's because we're all afraid to make art that is unique and ugly and weird. People kind of have this feeling of paranoia when it comes to mutations in the artistic process, right? Even on film productions that I've been on, I'm not going to name them. I'm not going to name the directors because it's not about them. It's really the way that the whole industry is set up. There's not much room for creativity. You know, unless you're James Cameron and you've got an entire history of creating exactly what it is you want to do and pushing, like for lack of a better word, creative boundaries. Not many studios give creative teams a lot of freedom, especially now that it's a huge business model, right? Because Marvel has proven time and time again you can skin the cat in many ways and people will still watch it. And so everyone's just trying to do the same thing, and I don't have an interest in doing that. And it's a very, very personal decision of mine. It's, you know, it kind of eats away at me, right? Like it's just like, oh, another stupid sci-fi fucking city.
I've
Oh God, Jan and I have this talk
Yeah.
all the
I
time,
mean,
don't we?
it's funny you mentioned fear, and I think that's one of the main driving forces in this day and age where everything is measured by by likes, right? It's the fear of bearing your soul and with the possibility of being rejected. That's why I feel like this kind of culture has come from the top down to parade like even personal projects. Like I look at so much, like I love it when artists do their own IPs, or whatever you want to call it, in whatever form, as a comic book, as a short film, as whatever else. But when they say that, oh my God, I spent the last 3 years on this project, and then you see it, and it's like you said, like you just mentioned, it's a derivative again, and you're like, I mean, I'm like, okay, this is really like you spent 3 years on that. That's pretty terrible. Not from a technical point of view, but like if you really connect with yourself and all that comes out of that is guns and spaceships that look exactly the same that you do during your day job, then I mean, okay, then either that's fine. Oh, it is fine. Of course it's fine, right? But that means like, okay, I guess you don't have really anything to say, or I'm not interested in what you have to say anymore. I don't know. But that's just me.
I mean, I can only, I guess the analogy I would have is there's a certain amount of energy that I can feel when I'm
Mm,
doing something I'm passionate about. If a metaphor is riding the horse, the passion is the horse, and I'm along for the ride. And where it can take me is always exhilarating.
mm,
It's not always great. Most of the time, it looks like shit, but the journey is so much more interesting when you have passion behind it versus, you know, doing something
mm,
purely for economic reasons, right? Like we're talking about. And I think in professional work, I try to find that passion in projects. I always request on any film that I'm contacted for to read the script, and when they say no, which they say 90% of the time, I don't take the job, and it really screws up my
mm.
financial life because that means I'm not going to get a paycheck this month. But I've just made these boundaries for myself where I will only take on a gig if I can find the passion in it. If I can find something that I can really bite into and really, really discover things with, whether that's an amazing team, an amazing sort of script or story, if there's something there that I can hold on to and hang on to for dear life for the ride, it just results in interesting work. The outcome is always very unpredictable, and I think that's something that I desperately need in order to do something. Otherwise, I
Right.
pretty much
I
lose
think that's a
interest in it.
perfect segue to kind of bring Neal into the picture and say like, okay, what does Neal have that made you so interested?
And what am I doing here with a room full of artists? That's so. I'll spend 3 minutes talking about myself. Um, I decided 15 years ago that I was going to work in sustainability in food systems and sustainability in the built environment. That was the passion that I discovered in my. It happened over time, but it was really in my mid 20s when I said, no, I'm going to find a way to make this my career. Um, so that was about 14 years ago. About 12, 11, 12 years ago, I was invited to be a co-founder of a project called the Albeitha Project, where I was brought on by a Saudi princess to go and live with tribes of settled nomads in the Saudi desert and work with them to reverse about a century's worth of desertification and reestablish indigenous land management systems in partnership with these camel herding Bedouin. Uh, and I am an Arabic speaker. I was very familiar with the culture, and that was my chance to get into the kind of work that I wanted to dedicate myself to. So I quit the office job I had at the time. I moved to the desert, about an hour drive south of Mecca in the Western Arabian Peninsula, and I spent 8 years with these tribes of Bedouin, uh, essentially prototyping and designing systems to bring ecology back to the land and to find a way to make that land productive so that people could make a living on it again. And that has connections to all sorts of things. It was extremely multivariate, right? It was applied ecology, it was agroforestry, it was hydrology, it was international development, it was cultural, integrating myself into a foreign culture and establishing myself as a leader as a foreign entity. And we did it. You know, we had a prototype site that is a geographic fractal of the rest of the region, and as we worked, we watched life come back to this land, starting with water, and then insects, and then birds and lizards, the mycelial web, trees and forbs and grasses, honeybees, small mammals, and over the course of the years on that project, we watched life come back to this land because of the work we were doing. That was a nonprofit project, and the last 3 or 4 years of my engagement there, I was just racking my brains, thinking this kind of stuff can solve so many problems, whether it's related to climate or biodiversity and habitat loss, or livelihood creation and poverty, or food and water security. And I spent years thinking, how do we turn this into something that is profitable so that it is self-sustaining? Because we knew it was ecologically sustainable. We knew it was culturally resonant, let's say. And we knew that because it was based on a geographic fractal, we knew that it could scale. But it was, as a nonprofit project, we were constantly fundraising and asking for funds and doing this off of donations. And so when I left that project, when my role was done, and we always knew that my role was going to end at some point. The system would be established. It would succeed or fail, right? But either way, once it failed or succeeded, my role would be over. And so I went to business school for a year to incubate the company that I started immediately after, which is called Regenerative Resources. And what we do is we transform degraded land into either restored ecosystems or into functioning agroecologies. And we're doing it primarily with seawater on coastal lands. And so that's the world I live in. I'm in the regenerative movement. I think a lot about biodiversity and climate and soil and water and food and livelihoods and poverty. And it's exactly, I had this conversation with Saiful recently, but 15 years ago when I was like, what do I really want to do with my life? What I'm doing now is exactly what I would have imagined. It is exactly what I hoped to be doing. And my work is deeply meaningful to me because I have followed my passion and found a way to make a living out of it. But also because I feel like I'm working on things that are deeply important, not just to me, but to the communities that we partner with. Um, and I think the stories that we tell have a lot of impact on people outside of the world that we live in. The video I made about our project in Saudi Arabia, which is extremely amateur. Like I'm sure you guys watch this video and you're like, oh, the lighting's all wrong, the audio is terrible. You know, it's a very amateur video because I made it and I'm an amateur video maker. But the story is such that um, you know, we've got 800,000 views on it on YouTube with no it's just YouTube's algorithm and word of mouth that this is spreading. And I've never seen more positive comments on a YouTube video than on my video. It's just a massive flood of people saying this resonates with me really, really hard. This is something that I didn't know was possible and that is giving me hope or giving me inspiration. And of course, I find that extremely validating, and I find that it gives me a lot of sense of purpose and meaning as well. So there's some internal validation for me on what I'm doing, and a lot of external as well. And it's I love it. I love what I do.
How did you get mixed up with these artists?
That's a great question. I got an email last summer saying from the office of Mr. Saiful Haque, and asking if I'd be willing to take a meeting. And I said, sure. What are we talking about? And they're like, well, you have to sign an NDA first. So I signed an NDA, and Saiful and I had a phone call, and he was asking for my advice on a project that he was working on. And really, Saiful, I think you should tell this story. I think it's safer if you tell it. How did you get mixed up with me?
For anyone that's listening that likes the film Dune, Neal is the guy that can make a desert green again. And he could do it in a way where he enables the planet to take care of herself and people can get the fuck out of the way. I saw Neal's video on YouTube. It was an incredible, desolate landscape as a before picture. And the after picture was this heavenly image of grass romantically moving in the wind with trees everywhere in sight. And I had to know, who the fuck is this guy? And so I emailed him. I'm like, how did you do this shit? And how can we work together? And for me, on that particular project, the goal was trying to visualize a future that really looked more hopeful than every damn film I've worked on. And every story, every film that depicts a future is very dystopian. You know, it's a very dry and arid place with a lot of guns, a lot like Mad Max, right? And I got just tired of doing work that just keeps looking like this shit because I don't believe in this narrative that the future is going to look like that. Really, there's a lot of anger behind that. You know, it's like we kind of gave up on ourselves, like we can't sustain our own lives, and it's a very personal sort of anger too, because I think I began to believe that narrative during COVID, even for my own life, right? Like there's no hope out there. And here was this scientist in the middle of a desert, just humbly moving a ton of rocks, rediverting rain and floodwater, and not planting seeds for this massive amount of vegetation that just spread like wildfire. And there's no attention going to him. And so I decided, fuck it. I'm going to roid this guy up and try to get his research as much attention as I can with the art that we can make. Because the art we tend to make draws inspiration and draws crowds, right? I mean, it's why we work in the film industry, right? You know, the trailers people watch, they're an amazing visual feast. And so, how could I create a visual feast to fund the science was the question. Um, so yeah, I reached out to Neal with hopes of starting that sort of collaboration.
And then that was the start. And I think what we came to is what if we could use art not just to imagine a better future, but to catalyze it? What would that look like, right? Because if we're imagining a better future, it's gonna come from the storytellers and the entrepreneurs, right? And then everybody else catches up to it, right? But it's so funny. Like we look at Star Trek or Minority Report, all these things that were imagined have become real in some, like the tools that were imagined 50 years ago are now tools that we use all the time. Now our cell phone this is something that they imagined in Star Trek, right? The tricorder or whatever it was, and now it's a real thing. And so there's this real idea that reality is stranger than fiction, but that imagining the future can be catalytic for the future that we build. And what if we used art as a way to do that? And so I have projects that we have launched in Namibia, Spain, Ghana, and Mexico, where we are restoring ecosystems in a way that it's creating livelihoods for local communities. And in these projects, we are going to grow about 100 million mangroves. I don't know if we have time to get into why mangroves are so awesome. They have been called the most important tree on the planet by other scientists. I have never said that because I don't think there is a more important tree or a less important tree per se. But in terms of carbon drawdown, mangroves are 5 to 10 times faster and more dense in terms of carbon sequestration than tropical and temperate forests. So when it comes to climate change, they're a powerhouse. And the other thing they are is they're the roots of the ocean. I've seen numbers as high as, this was a statistic I saw in Manga Bay, that 2/3 of all ocean species at some point in their life cycle depend on mangroves. So, and they're known as the roots of the ocean because coral reef fish, commercial fish, they all spawn, they lay their eggs in these forests that are growing in the ocean. And we've lost 30% of them since the 1970s globally. And so I have co-founders who are pioneers of mangrove agroforestry who have developed systems to transform degraded coastal landscapes into mangrove forests and mangrove agroforestry systems by bringing seawater onto the landscape and using it to produce food, using it to produce fuel, using it to produce fiber, and all sorts of other things. And so we have these projects. We've been working on them for the last 3 years, getting permits, getting access to land, building local teams, building out local business plans and financial models that are relevant to each project. And now we have launched them and we have to finance them. And so when I talked with Saiful about where we were in this process, and that our need right now is primarily for funding. We came to this idea of an NFT project, and Saiful recruited Jan, and also Filippo, who's not with us on the podcast, but he's been really lovely to work with, and he's an amazing artist. And we are doing a series of NFTs and other Web3 products with the hopes of raising enough to grow 100 million mangroves in the projects that we have now. So that's the project we launched it this week. We have posters for these short films that Jan and Saiful and Filippo are making. Just like when you walk into a movie theater and you see posters for films that are coming out in 6 months or a year, that's what these posters are. We've got the first ones up for auction on Opensea. And that's, it's ambitious. I think the objective is to shoot for the stars and hit the moon, and we'll see where it goes. But it's an adventure. I think it's somewhat new for all of us. We're all learning, and but I'd like to hear Jan and Saiful talk about how this has been different, because they're gifting this art. They're being very generous with it, but you're not getting paid. I don't have any money to pay you in the first place, right? I'm trying to raise money. So I'm really curious to hear what this experience has been like for you, Jan, and for you, Saiful. And has it been so far? We're not to the end of it, but what's the process been like compared with this dilemma that we just spent a half hour talking about?
You want to go first, or do you want me to go first? Okay. I mean,
You can go first.
it was interesting. I mean, I've been witness to this to the formation of this a bit more than probably most people, but I remember the time when Saiful said, like, oh, I brought this guy in and he's gonna tell us how to give meaning to this project that we're both on, and I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And then he just vaguely kept talking about him, and then little did we know it would turn into this, right? But I mean, even back then, Saiful gave me a lot of freedom on whatever I was doing, even on the client job. And he said he's gonna explain to the client that this is what we're doing, and he's not gonna take any shit from them, so to speak. But so I was happy to kind of follow Saiful even in this new endeavor, even though it was like, well, like there was no brief, there was just like, I don't know, do whatever the hell you like. And I was like, wow, that's very different and also very scary, because we're kind of used to like, okay, here's a brief, here's a description, and this is what you need to do, and then I need it tomorrow, by the way. And you're like, yeah, give me sketches and all this kind of stuff, from client jobs. And this is really, I think that the first instruction I got from Saiful was like, just don't do anything. I don't want to see anything. Like just sit under a tree and think about it. I was like, okay. I mean, that surely sounds like a way better first day or week or whatever than on any job I ever had. So I was really that was really different, right? So basically what I did, instead of like sitting down after maybe half an hour of research and cranking out like 10 sketches for the first day, I was just thinking and going out and going for a run and just looking around me and I don't know, looking again and really trying to get, like, I think as concept artists, as commercial artists, you kind of go after the first best idea that pops into your head, because you need to produce something, and even though we know that it would yield better results if you just let all this first wave kind of sink in and kind of go its course, and then think about it a bit more the next day. Even though we know that this would yield better results, we can't afford to do that. It's just not possible. Everything needs to be done tomorrow, or better even yesterday, and you just need to go with the first best thing that pops into your head. And it was a weird experience to kind of let this all wash over you. And instead of just putting pen to paper and sketching all these things out that you have in your head, you kind of like you kind of put it aside and you think about it again, and you try to get in the habit of doing that and just to see what happens. So for me, it was more like a discovery process of trying to connect with I don't know, with a different part of my creativity, I think. And all these urges of like, oh, I need to make it bigger and better, and like, oh, cool, if I do this, and then I think we all of us artists, we have patterns we fall in. It's like, okay, once I have a sketch, I know exactly the steps I need to take this to something that looks good enough to show to a client, right? And and for the most part, it's autopilot because it needs to get done. And even to kind of break those habits of like, oh, I think I've done enough today. Like, this is as good as it gets right now. I think I need to take a step away from it and come back to it tomorrow. And being able to afford that kind of time, I think is quite a luxury, right? I mean, of course, we have other projects that pay the bills and everything, like Saiful said, right? But letting this unfold, this project unfold in a more natural way, I think has been very rewarding. Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know if it's going to be the best thing that I've ever made, but I think in terms of how I feel about it, it's definitely a lot closer to how I'd like to work than the other stuff. I don't know. What about you, Saiful?
Man, this should have been
Of
fucking
course, it's the
hard,
hardest
dude.
thing.
You know, I tend to get my ideas when I'm sitting on the toilet, or when I'm taking a shower, or when I'm at the gym, or when I'm swimming. They never come to me at my desk. Every time I try to force an idea while I'm sitting at the desk, it's fucking utter shit, dude. It you know, kind of going back to this concept of fear and social media and client expectations. I think these are boxes and shapes and volumes that we impose upon our ideas, right? Whether that's a short film you're making or a painting, there's these boundaries that kind of manifest before the idea can even find its way into fruition, right? And like you said, with that process, you kind of fill that volume, and yeah, there's your shitty sci-fi city again, right? And this particular project it's much more aligned with how I worked when I was young, when money didn't exist, right? When I was just doing art because I absolutely love doing it. This process has been extremely excruciating, quite depressing at times. I found myself taking the advice I gave you, Jan, going on walks, reading a lot of poetry, thinking about the meaning of life, thinking about the meaning of my own life, thinking about blockchain technology, and wondering what the fuck was I gonna make.
And was it excruciating and hard because there was no assignment, so to speak? Well, because you both, like Jan, you nodded your head when Saiful was like, "This has been so hard." Like it's been, and so as a non-artist, explain that to me. What makes this so hard to you as an artist? Because I mean, we did have a prompt. You didn't get a brief. You got a paragraph that said, "Imagine that people are good for Earth. Imagine that we're not a virus that is inherently destructive, and imagine us as a keystone species." Right? That was it. Right? No, like I want it to look like there was no input whatsoever. But that is the narrative that we want to help push. And so I'm really curious to hear what made this so difficult.
I think for me specifically, I'm gonna take this quote from a dear friend of mine. So when I was younger in college, I was blessed with the opportunity to work with Sid Mead. He kind of mentored me for some time when I was developing as a student, and he told me that when we're painting and drawing the future or envisioning a post-apocalyptic dystopian view of that future, that shit was easy. That is easy to complain. It's easy to be negative. It's kind of automatic. And when it came to this project, it was the opposite. It was to try to be hopeful, to try to be inspirational, to try to have a vein or a silver lining within the actual art, and to dig for that, to find that, to try to manifest an image from that, I think is to go against my code, to go against every part of my upbringing, because so much of the world I live in doesn't say that, right? I mean, unless you're watching Sesame Street, right, which is being very positive and touting something that is inspirational. As an adult, it's quite rare to find inspiration that is aligned with what we're trying to do.
Mm.
And I think the reason it was so hard for me was I myself wasn't necessarily a happy, inspired, positive individual, right? It's, we're living in the midst of a global pandemic where there are so many countless people that do not have any opportunities. There are so many artists today that are watching this podcast that are starving. And here I was asked to do something hopeful when everything around me said despair. And again, this is all in my head too, right? That I myself was also going through, and still am going through a depression. And so to try to swim out of that depression and paint positivity, oh, that was a journey. That was a climb up out of a hole.
Mm.
Interesting. I think for me the difficulty has a lot to do with, again, like what I mentioned earlier about I'm very tuned into like producing art as a service, and I usually don't have any difficulty like pulling some kind of like fictitious brief out of my ass if I need to just produce some personal work. But I think again, putting all that aside and trying to see what else is there, and trying to resist all the urges just to get it done. That's been. I mean, it's basically the confrontation of like, well, what do you have anything to say, or like do I have anything to say? Is there anything? And being confronted with the potential shallowness of myself is scary.
Mm.
I don't know. I leave that for other people to judge if I'm shallow or not, right?
Yeah, because I actually, when it comes to Jan, I mean, I know you haven't really made a lot of personal work. I mean, like we're kind of a little bit of a opposites that way. Because I think for you, it's just I asked you that you're like, yeah, I'm not really like into that, but you wanted to work on your own film and stuff, but that would have been your personal work, but. I am, is curious how, all of a sudden now you have to create personal work that, because of the lack of, expressing something, like there's no brief, that must be difficult, right?
It's very difficult.
Well, also there's no measure or there's nothing to measure it by, right? Because on a job with a client, a thumbs up or a thumbs down is like, cool, I did the job. But who's controlling that thumb up or down when you're doing something personal? And to not have that soundboard or to not have that feedback instantly, you like Jan is saying, you're gonna have to face yourself, because that's gonna be you at the end of that day, right? And I think when you do something for a client, you'll say, yeah, that's good enough. It hit the pitch. I hit the target. I got close enough. good job, well done, and the paycheck confirms that, and then the what that paycheck pays for in your life confirms that, and so you see it working, right? But when it comes to personal work, I think there's this gigantic valley of death where you might start something that you're completely inspired by, but then have a gigantic chunk of that time spent making that where you're completely unsure if it's even going to be worth showing. And then you have nothing giving you feedback if that's valuable, if that's a good use of your time, right? And so you're in this sort of alien landscape all of a sudden where you're not comfortable. Everything's very unfamiliar.
Sometimes being out of that comfort zone is exactly, the recipe for growth. I found it, for me at least, because this year has been super uncomfortable, but I'm the better for it, at least for me. And I don't know for you guys. I mean, especially Jan. I mean, are you finding that it's? I mean, are you done? Are you guys all done with the? Yeah. What is the status of the project? I saw the posters, but I don't know.
I think it's in various stages. I think some of us are done, some of us are not quite done yet. So there we are, right?
How about you? I mean, are you done? Are you working on it?
I'm not fully done yet. I'm still tinkering around on it, but it's taking shape. It's taking shape.
And you feel like you're growing from this.
Well,
like you're past the
scary
part.
I think is never going to go away. I think one of the things that is just like, and I don't know, it has to do with, I mean, okay, of course there's a whole different dimension to this, right? Like we talked about, like this is supposed to raise money for 100 million mangroves, right? It is part of it, and that comes on top of it, and then even like Saiful brought me into this, so I don't want to disappoint him, right? And it's like there's multiple different levels stacked on top of this, but when it just purely comes to myself, it's like I think I have certain expectations of what I want to do and how I want it to look, and like you said, like I'm thinking about, like, I don't know, I want to make a short movie or whatever, right? And then you have certain ideas of how that's supposed to go, and then this project is something else entirely again, I think, and it's I want the like, I don't necessarily have a goal with that journey. Of course, there's going to be a finished piece in the end, but where this journey of the creation takes me, I think I want it to lead the way as much as possible. And I have to kind of not try to steer it down any familiar path, and that's quite, I think, unusual, and I don't know where it's going to take me. I have no idea, and maybe I'm a little bit afraid it's going to lead me down a way that I don't want to go, but I think it's just whatever happens will happen, and I think like Saiful's serendipity will take care of it to a certain extent, and then we'll see where we are, and
I don't know.
It's like what you mentioned before, right? So,
and there's no pressure or expectation coming from me. I think, going to fine art galleries and looking at other artists' work that I admire, I think I've found time and time again that it's never about fidelity, crispness, finish, medium. It's never about anything that we would find impressive as artists that know the craft. It's always been about, for me, a feeling of intention behind the piece, right? It could literally be drawn on a napkin with ketchup, but if there is an intention behind it and I can feel it, I'm so much more engaged. And I think to create something like that, you have to reach in from a different source of inspiration that sometimes doesn't exist. Sometimes it's a muscle that hasn't been exercised in years. And it's like, not going to the gym for a couple of years and suddenly going to the gym and saying, "Oh, I'm gonna pick up the really heavy weight," and because I'm a strong person, and then you go and you grab it and to pick it up, and then you realize you're not as strong as you think you are. You're not as visionary or as spectacular as you expect to be, and that becomes the tug of war, and the end result happens to be the art, the end result of that battle, and I think that's what we're all experiencing here, and I'm pretty sure, Emmanuel, you can speak volumes about this when it comes to personal work, that it's really a dance with yourself.
Yeah, it definitely, it definitely is. It's also a matter of how deep you're willing to go within yourself, to find yourself. I mean, I think for me, working on the stuff that I've been working on lately, especially my own short, there was a lot of digging involved. Let's just say, and it's one of those things where, I mean, for me, I think the digger I deep, the better the outcome, and the more I feel better as a person, personally. So, yeah, I mean, I think personal work is where it's at right now, for me. But I actually wanted to ask, Neal, some details. Like
Sure.
you have four artists, so far, right? Not one, two, three artists.
Three
Uh,
three for this first set, yeah.
and then so are they? Is it just like if let's talk a little bit about where is, I know you said Opensea. When is it? Sort of.
So this we can talk about the program as it is now and where we see this going. Um, right now we've got 15 posters on Opensea. The films are going to be released on the Cosmos ecosystem. We're going to migrate. That's in part because of who's collaborating with us, in part because I believe in that ecosystem, and in part because it has a much lighter footprint than Ethereum does. And even after Ethereum goes to proof of stake, it'll still have a much lighter footprint. So we have Saiful and Jan and Filippo doing short films. And these films, our intention is for the films to be revealed as these NFTs are sold and resold. So the first purchaser may only get 5 frames of the entire film. And the next 5 frames of the film will not be revealed until they sell it to the next person. And so these are films that will be revealed over time as they are sold and resold. And each time it's resold, a percentage of that will go into a nonprofit fund that we have, which will fund the tree planting that we're doing in our projects. And so that's technologically very difficult. So we have an outfit of programmers called 11 Yellow, where their role in the project is just to design the smart contract and that NFT, which they are all, again, they are also donating their time and their skill and their energy to build the technology to allow that to happen, because it's quite difficult. And there are not many people on the planet who would know how to do that with a smart contract. And so it's those 3 films, and the intention is we want them to be sold and resold until the whole thing is revealed, right? So that's the dynamic NFT part. And then the posters are just previews that allows us to build hype around the project, to build awareness around the project. Whoever buys these posters will get producer credit on the short films. So five people will buy the 5 posters for Saiful's film, which is called Manifest. And those 5 people will be named producers of the film. So they're getting producer credit. And Jan mentioned the pressure of trying to raise a lot of money. This is not the only thing we're doing with this series, but one of the beautiful things about NFTs is that every time it is resold, even if it's 10 years in the future, money will go from that purchase to our tree planting programs. And our 15-year goal at Regenerative Resources is to grow 1 billion mangroves. So there's no lack of demand. There's no lack of space. But the fact that these are now assets that will indefinitely provide resources for the restoration of really important ecologies on the planet, I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I honestly didn't know exactly what this was about. And then
Yeah.
and the interview and Jan telling me, but uh, I'm looking at doing a little bit research on the side as you were talking, just to see. I'm definitely going to watch that video. But I mean, I'm floored. I mean, and I really appreciate that, Saiful. One thing that speaks a lot to me is that you actually proactively, seeked out Neal to do something, and most people don't do that. They'll watch and consume media, and then they go, well, okay, I'm going on to the next thing. And you have the insight and the to see what this is worth, and to be moved by it. I think it's actually, it moves me, and I really like, um you know really like what you're doing. So that's that. I guess that's just what I'm saying. If they were to go, I mean, they can just follow the poster. There's links to Opensea and the
Yep.
project and all that, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So we just launched our new website. It's regenerativeresources.co. One of the pages on there is called The Harpoon, with the idea being that there are crypto whales out there, and that we want to find them and catch them and get them involved in this stuff so that we have the resources necessary to do the work we want to do. And so that's where our Web3 efforts are hosted, is at the Harpoon. I find myself on Twitter quite a bit, because that's where NFT marketing happens, is on Twitter. But beyond this particular project, we do want to make an invitation to the artists out there that if this is something you want to contribute to, there is a way to make that happen. I don't want to limit this to Saiful and Jan and Filippo. I think, A, I need all the help I can get, but B, I know how fulfilling it can be to participate in healing the planet. One of the most sublime moments of my life was, I woke up one morning and I went to work, and I saw a wild swarm of bees on a tree that I had planted 4 years earlier. And I asked one of the men on my team who was local. He was a 65-year-old man named Urschel. And I said, when was the last time you saw wild bees on this particular mountain? And he said, it's been 40 years. It's been decades.
Wow.
And that is one of the most magical moments I have ever had. And part of what I want to do is make a way for that to happen for other people who aren't necessarily out on the ground actually planting trees, but to contribute to this kind of mission of, hey, we can be good for the earth, we can heal the earth, and save ourselves in the process. It takes all types, and that's what Saiful and Jan and Filippo are doing. That's the mission contributing to. And I would like to make that available to anyone who's inspired by that mission or would like to contribute. And so that's part of where we see this going. One of Saiful's one of the things Saiful did about halfway through this was he named himself our artist in residence. Where he was like, hey, I'm going to be this for you guys, all right? And I'm like, great, we will absolutely take that. But this isn't a closed program. because I think it's going to take all of us to help make that mission happen.
I'm just curious, how much does it cost you to even plant a tree? Like
It depends, but it's the tree planting is actually the easiest part. Before that happens, I should note that there are lots of wrong ways to plant a tree. If you plant the wrong species in a particular place, you can do a lot of damage. If you just go and plant trees in a random place, it's likely people are going to come and cut them down. If it's not integrated into the life ways of local people, if it's not integrated into the ecosystems as they should be, or into the hydrology of the place, there's a lot of failure that happens there. And so before we do any tree planting, we there's a lot of permit authorizations that need to happen. There's a lot of building relationships with local communities. We spend at least 12 months with local communities in conversation around understanding what their needs are, understanding what the problems are that they face, understanding how they interact with land and with ecosystems. And once you have a cohesive program, right, where it's integrated with local ecosystems, it's co-designed with local peoples, we're certain that people aren't going to come cut it down because they see the value in leaving it up. Then you can go and plant a tree. And so there's a huge amount of work that goes into doing this right. It's why that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years on these projects, is getting that pre-development phase going. But if you want a pithy answer, the basic answer, once all that's done, it's about $1 a tree for our projects.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, I would just say, whoever's listening, really listen and see this speaks to you, and whether it's something you want to contribute to, whether if in the art sense or even in going and buying some NFTs to support this project.
Cool.
Yeah.
And either one works. Cool. And it's the artists and the storytellers that I think we need to change the narrative. And so I'm honored by Jan and Saiful and Filippo's gift. It is a gift of your energy and your time and your skill. And it's a gift that we're going to honor, but also one that is going to fund ecosystem restoration indefinitely. Right? Unless there's like nuclear war or another Krakatoa volcano or like an asteroid, as long as the digital world persists and this artwork is trading hands, it's going to fund ecosystem restoration. And I think that's super cool.
Great.
That's awesome.
So I think we've reached quite a good time here to find some closing words. I just wanted to ask if there's anything maybe Saiful, Neal, or Emmanuel wanted to say before we kind of close out here. You're sighing very heavily, Saiful.
I've noticed that's what he does very often.
I promise you, I'm a positive person. I've been called aggressively positive. I'm gonna take the words out of Neal's mouth here. I remember a conversation we had where he was saying that some of the world's elite believe that as humans, as a species, we kind of fucked up. That this was human 1.0, and when I say this, I mean Earth, and that people are corrupt and the world is corrupt, and you can't get rid of evil and greed, and you know what, we should just go to Mars and try again. We've got another chance. Let's call it 2.0. And I'm all for that. I'm all for space travel. I've worked in the industry. I love SpaceX. I love Elon Musk. But we're not screwed. Like, we're not fucking screwed. Look around you. Go outside. Stop looking at your phone all day. Turn off the damn news and just breathe the air. And trust me, if you can just go for a walk, you're going to begin to get a little bit of more hope in your bloodstream. We're not screwed. Neal, his organization, and the scientists behind this movement need our compassion. Fundamentally, they just need our compassion. And we just need to get out of their way so they can do their work. The planet can heal itself. And maybe we can use these systems of greed to benefit the very science that can enable the planet to do what it has done for millennia. We're not fucking screwed. And you can be a part of that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I was just like,
any better way
you've
to
done all the work
end
for me.
than
That's
that.
perfect. That's perfect. No, that's really great. I think this has been a really, really great conversation. You're going to find all the links, everything we talked about. You're going to find it in the description of this video. And just again, a big thank you to Neal and Saiful, and of course Emmanuel, for taking the time and talk so openly, I think, and honestly about this project we're doing, and of course the struggle that we've all been facing recently. So again, a big thank you, and I hope to the audience that you've got something out of it. And if you want to contribute to this project in whatever form, if you want to maybe buy the NFTs, or if you want to help spread the word, or even if you're an artist yourself and you feel like, hey, this is exactly what I've been looking for, feel free to reach out to Neal or Saiful or myself to get more information of how you can be involved and what's possible. So again, thank you all, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.